Hello there. Fancy seeing you here on this fine day. I will unfortunately have to whip out one of my myriad diversity points to prove my ethos, to prove my credibility. Because everyone else that I've seen talk about it seems to be dancing around the subject, but seems afraid to say it. So just, I'll say it. I'll say it. I'll say it. Trans guys, trans masks, all of it, they can be misogynistic. Just because you can see my hand in my face. Here, I'll hold it with one hand. Just because you used to live as a girl does not mean that you can't be misogynistic. Have we not learned about internalized misogyny? What happened to that? That's a word, phrase, thing people say. What happened there? Grew up in the circle club, right? And there's also the square club. And in society, they like that squares more. And grow up here in the circle club, and the circles are worse. So then you start getting internalized circle hate, right? Well, what if one day you fucking become a square? Just bear with me. You are a trans shape and you become a square, okay? That doesn't mean you don't have those thoughts anymore. Like, you're just not. That just takes out the internalized part of the misogyny. You still have the other part of the phrase. Getting a bit heated, pardon me. There's just the fact that, like, that clip of him talking about how I'll insert it here. Clip.
I know the most cancelable thing I've ever done. Because someone genuinely just told me that I should go back and scrub out the internet of all of my cancelable offenses before I become too famous. And on the one hand, I'm a little bit flattered because you think I'm gonna be famous. But on the other, I think you're insane. What do you think I've been doing? I've never been racist. I've never been homophobic. I've never been a bigot. I was raised a woman. There was no locker room talk. And the most cancelable thing I've ever done was entirely justified. I was probably 18, 19. One of my father's girlfriends wouldn't stop vague posting about me and my mom on Facebook. So me, being young, angry, and medicated out of my mind pre-therapy, naturally told him to muzzle his bitch and shorten the leash. And keep in mind, I looked like this. This wasn't a misogyny thing. It was a young, angry punk hating my father thing. And I'm talking every single time I disagreed with that man. Every single time I had something to say about the way he treated me or my mom. Within minutes, there was always a Facebook post talking about, oh, it's so heartbreaking to see that children just don't respect what their families do for them, blah, 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 blah.
You get it, right? That's not how that works. You can't just be like, this is how I looked, so it wasn't a misogyny thing. Huh? You can't be doing that. That's not how that works. Why would that be how it works? That's not how it works for fucking anything else. Like, huh? People always want to be able to punch down at someone. And it frustrates me. And I'll say it. I've seen it a bit more with white people. White. I know. And I just think it's a bit of a habit I've seen on occasion when somebody's like, especially white trans people, like, it feels like they're so fucking fast to be like, I can't be problematic because I'm trans, or I can't be problematic because of my diversity points. Like, we can all be problematic. I could be problematic. We can all be problematic. Let trans men have enough fucking dimension in your brain to let them be sucky men, because some of them are. This shit just makes me so annoyed. It makes me so annoyed. And then the fact that this person felt the need, okay, my arm's getting tired. I need to wildly gesticulate with both of my hands. Flips my ears. Flips them back because I like the symmetry of it. It sucks being trans. It does, especially nowadays in the US. Oh my god. Believe me, I get it. And I'm also disabled. I had a pee sack until like 3 days ago. 5 days ago? Less than a week ago. I was a Capri Sun. I don't want to make it sound like I'm even comparing, because there's this stupid fucking infighting that happens among trans spaces online. AKA just stupid fucking Tumblr tags and, like, Discord servers, I'm guessing. That's what queer spaces means half the fucking time to these people who are being dramatic. But I digress. I know there are some people who are just like, ooh, trans men have it easier or whatnot. And I'm not trying. I think that's dumb. I do. Because I don't want to get into that, because that'll get some people mad. It's weird. Because everybody forgets that the other half exists. There is that kind of, like, I guess it's somewhat of a privilege. There's good and bad about it, about this sort of invisibility that a lot of trans men seem to be able to achieve, like, in their more day-to-day lives. Yeah. Kind of floating under the radar of, like, all the fucking crazy people who are being like, they're gonna take hormones for years and grow tits and fucking wear new clothes and do everything for years just to do crime instead of just walking in and doing the crime. But just, they don't really think about the other side, because obviously the other end of that is like, okay, make all the trans men go into the women's bathroom. That's fine. I'm not going to be the one who's the most uncomfortable there. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, what the fuck? It's so silly. But there is, I guess you could call it, like, a privilege. This is Hilda, the hummingbird. Can you say hi? I mean, obviously it differs based off of people's individual circumstances, but let me whip out my ancient tome that I was writing notes in. Look, it's got, like, the fancy gold on the edge. Not this thing. Oh, my cat is here. Are you going to rustle? Oh, I wrote multiple pages. I do sure love to yap. Okay. What have I already covered? What have I already covered? Oh, right. Just as a personal anecdote, I'm not even talking in this big broad sense. I've personally seen multiple trans dudes who just become fucking giga douchebags as soon as they start to, like, be treated differently. And even just people who I, like, used to be fairly close friends with just become, like, assholes. Especially once they start getting laid. Like, once they start passing well, and then that's when it seems to happen. But I digress. I digress again. I'm obviously not in Mr. the Catastrophe. Is it Tyler the Catastrophe or Tyler Catastrophe? I don't think there's a the. Mr. Catastrophe. I can't be in his brain, obviously, but let me just walk y'all through some perspectives that I've seen, because I don't see that many people talk about it, because it is kind of, there is the whole, like, once you are openly trans online, you are kind of, hi, I'm staring at my cat, is a kind of, like, vulnerability, and it's almost this, like, willful sacrifice of the respect that you know a lot of people are gonna give you, because it just is a fact of life that a lot of fucking people respect men much more than they respect women, and there's also a lot of people who are like, ooh, that's just a fucking confused lesbian or whatever the hell. And I'm sure, like, well, I'm not sure, I can't be sure of anything. I do think that might be part of why some people are so willing to, like, defend the status quo and the patriarchy, because it really bothered me that, like, he kind of apologized for the shovel thing, but it really kind of seemed more like, I'm sorry I said anything, as opposed to kind of reflecting on the actual issue there. And I think it's not great to insert yourself into a situation that, like, has nothing to do with you, and especially to somebody who, like, endured so much hate and harassment for coming forward. Tyler says he has experienced abuse before, which is like, that sucks, yeah, but he uses that to kind of, like, demean other people's abuse or say it wasn't abusive. It almost turned into this lecture of, you're lecturing somebody about that they actually did consent to something and they, like, didn't communicate properly, and that's their fault. Like, maybe I'll include a clip there.
I do not think that Wilbur said is an abuser, and I know I've said that fairly indirectly in the past, especially recently, but I do feel like now it needs to be said point blank, because as someone who has been a victim of abuse, sexual assault, and domestic violence, I know way too well what those things look like. And while I know that most of my audience knows how I approach things like this by now, I also know that if I post this video, there will probably be a lot of people who don't know me who see it, so I'm going to try to be as kind, direct, and clear-cut as I can. So I'm going to stick to 3 main points from Shovel's wads. Please go and watch them yourself, you are under no obligation to think the way that I do. And then I'm going to touch on Wilbur's response, and then I think the general response needs to be addressed as well. Because Shovel's main points were that Wilbur was a slob, had a messy house, that she paid for a lot of her weight to see him, and that he bit her. For point 1, Let's be honest, most men aren't taught how to take care of themselves in their living spaces. And for men in their early 20s, that's a lot worse than it should be. Every man I dated in their late teens, early 20s was gross. That's just kind of par for the course. It sucks, but it is to be expected. And it is not by default malicious. 2, paying your own way, especially for a distance like that, is kind of expected. And when you take into account that they were both very successful in their respective careers at that point, paying your own expenses isn't by default malicious. And for the third point, Shovel states very clearly in her follow-up pod that she consented to the biting. She then went on to clarify that what she had an issue with was the fact that it hurt. And while I don't think anyone should be hurt in their relationships, at the end of the day, that is a communication issue. And whether it's just a poor communication or lack thereof, both parties are responsible for that. Because a lack of communication or poor communication on either side is not by default malicious. And at the end of the day, when no assault took place, and the end result is just a bad relationship, that is something you handle in private, like adults. And to air personal, adult dirty laundry to a very large, very young audience in a way that is incredibly vague and left open to interpretation is, at the end of the day, very dishonest and very irresponsible. And that is made evident by the resulting response, where Wildersoot met Shovel where she was at, gave a very direct and validating response that responded to what was said, addressed what was said, validated what was said, and gave evidence that he was making moves to be better. And when that mature adult response was received by a very angry young audience, it was received as an admission of guilt and seen as validation for the wildly exaggerated rumors that came from leaving that sort of thing open to interpretation. And now, every mention of his name, his band, his career, anyone that has anything to do with him, is met with such vitriolic hatred that there's no room for anyone to improve anything at all. And when we live in a world where we are begging everyone and everything at all times to be better than it is, that kind of response does nothing but make everyone worse. And I stand with victims. I am one, several times over. But these sort of things have to be handled in a responsible way, because where we stand right now with the internet being the way it is, what we've ended up creating under the guise of supporting victims is a culture that has trained children, teenagers, young adults, anyone who will listen to be internet attack dogs for people that you don't know. And you're allowed to be upset, you're allowed to be angry, you are totally justified in those feelings. But if you allow yourself to be blindly swept up in those feelings and the roar of the crowd around you, eventually you are going to find yourself in a situation where you are being used as a weapon by angry people who just want to see other people burn. And I'm not saying you should support Will, I'm not saying you should continue listening to Lovejoy just because there's no evidence on either side. I'm saying that it is not your responsibility to be judge, jury, and executioner for people you don't know in situations that you don't understand. Because none of us have all of the information. In fact, in this instance, there was very little information to go on. And at the end of the day, ruining someone's life, someone's career, the careers and lives of everyone around them, for the crime of what is ultimately being a bad boyfriend, is not something that is your job to do. These are adults in their 20s and 30s who are still in the fucking up and learning from it stages of life. And above all else, they are people. And they are going to fuck up 1,000 times over. But the important part is that they learn from it. And if you do not allow them to do so, you only encourage them to be worse. Because I have seen the absolute worst that life has to offer time and time and time again. And I can tell you from experience that the only way things get better is if you let people change. So I'll encourage you to take a step back, feel your own feelings, and make your own decisions. I'm also going to encourage you to approach things like this with compassion. Because when it comes to situations where there's no sexual assault, there's no crime being committed, after all said and done, you have to let people be people. And if you're watching this and you're a young adult, you're a teenager, you're a child, then I applaud your willingness to be the change you want to see, but it is not your responsibility to hold adults accountable, especially when those adults are not people you know personally. And I'm proud of you for doing the best you can with what you know, but this isn't your fight. And I know that you personally probably have way too much to deal with already, and you don't deserve the burden of fighting someone else's fight. And I promise you, you're probably gonna find out you feel a whole lot better when you let yourself take a step back, because nobody's perfect, and no one needs to be. But we do need to recognize when it's time to be kind, even if it's just to ourselves.
How could you be so condescending when you know absolutely nothing about the situation? And people are much worse to women online. That's no secret at all. I've seen that be something that people, like trans dudes, once I've just heard about through the grapevine. I don't know. We don't all know each other, but there can only be so many discords here. But yeah, it can almost be as if you're proving loyalty to, like, the gender and consent dynamics. Like the traditional man and woman ones, you know? It feels almost like reinforcing and showing, like, a loyalty to the status quo, and kind of showing that you're less likely to challenge that in other, like, relatively non-traditional ways. Ya feel? Oh, I said the closest group of people with this kind of mindset I've seen are what people call pick-me's. That's brutal. I wrote that down. Yikes. If anybody ever physically writes down that I'm a pick-me, I think I'll cry. Anyways. Growing up around misogyny, seeing how generally men are treated better in society, it can sometimes bring this fraught sense of safety to fit in among cis dudes. I hate knowing that a bunch of people would treat me differently upon knowing, or finding out how I was raised. And maybe it's silly, but part of me feels like this over-adherence to the typical man-friendly narrative of abuse, what with the whole lecturing a woman you don't know about how she doesn't understand communication and respect. And chill. Unfortunately, openly caring about social dynamics in general is still widely regarded as a feminine trait, same with even basic kindness to other guys. There's such a normalized hostility culture, and I may be off base here, but I wouldn't be surprised. What? Someone's like dragging things in the hallway. Can you hear that? Okay, so there's such a normalized hostility culture, and I may be off base here, but I wouldn't be surprised if the situation has been worsened by a desire to be one of the boys while still openly trans and supposedly progressive online. Because not only is showing that kindness and understanding something that can result in some dirtbag guys, ostracizing trans guys, but I'm sure it can also feel like stepping back down to a lower patriarchal rank and causing more dysphoria. I forgot to record a proper little ending. That's pretty much all I had to say. And I'm not making any money off of this, by the way, before someone's like, ooh, lol, cow ethics. Because this was just about what the title's about. You feel? But yeah, I said basically, I think, all I wanted to say. I don't want to keep harping on it. Kind of a jarring sudden end to the video, I know. Sorry. Oh, I mean, I guess I have my print shop listed, but I still don't even know if it works. Like, I just set it up, and there's a couple things in there, so, if it's fully broken, let me know. Or don't. That's chill. But you should subscribe. It'd be awesome. I'm not gonna give the camera a kiss, that'd be weird. Never mind. You should subscribe from a nice social distance. Okay, bye!